Whom the Gods Fear. By Wdowski. Chapter 32. Landing back at the homestead, Doctor and Hogan came out from one of Rotha's livestock pens. She had been taking samples and scans of the domestic alien animals. She greeted Glen with a hug. "I am happy to see you back safely." Glen was surprised by her hug, and did not initially hug her back. Since she was not letting go, he felt comfortable enough that he could take her also in his arms and hug her in return. He kissed the top of her head, and responded by pulling herself closer to him and hugging him even tighter. She looked up at him. "Did you meet with Demi?" "We saw him," Glen responded. "And?" she asked him as they walked toward the farmhouse. Once inside, Glen saw the 3 women serving food to the science teams that had set up lab tables within the main room. "As we feared, he has set himself up as a living god. He justifies it by him ending world hunger, war, and healing of the sick." "Should we start packing up the science team to head them back up to the Polo?" Captain Mahan interrupted. "No, not yet." "I was under the impression you agreed to leave this world and not return," responded the Marine captain. "I only agreed to tell them back on Earth he wants this planet left alone. I didn't agree to anything else. I didn't even agree that I would recommend they follow his request." "Captain, we have an incoming vessel," one of his Marines reported. They went back outside and could see Demi's runabout approaching them. "He changed his mind?" asked Stovall. "Demi decided to return with us." The craft came to a hover just above them, and its 2 gull-wing doors opened up as the runabout faced them about 20 meters off the ground. "I don't think so." Glen responded by throwing her to the ground and shielding her with his body. "Get down," he shouted to all those in the courtyard. Just at the moment, 2 of Demi's men leaned out of the open runabout hatches with their antimatter rifles, spitting out micro shots no louder than air pellet guns. The micro pellets smashed against the shuttlecrafts, breaking free their antimatter contents, causing deafening explosions. After only a half-dozen shots, the 2 men pulled themselves back into the runabout, and the gull-wing hatch doors closed shut as the runabout peeled away from the scene, back towards the northern city. Simultaneously, the second runabout had approached the Polo. Within just a few kilometers from the starship, the runabout also raised its 2 gull-wing doors. 2 men in spacesuits leaned out of the open hatches and fired their antimatter rifles at the Polo. The gunmen aimed for the ship's bridge and hyper-engines. The micro-pellets were too small for the ship's sensors to detect as incoming threats, preventing the ship's computer from activating the repelling shield. The micro-pellets burst against the Polo, releasing antimatter atoms, exploding grapefruit-sized holes through the ship's armor and hull. The bridge and hyper-engine control room had to be evacuated as atmosphere escaped into the vacuum of space. Those, unfortunately, near the antimatter pellet hits were killed instantly or severely wounded. Glen stood helping and back up on her feet. She was covered in mud and dirt. "I am sorry. Are you hurt?" he asked her. Before and could respond to him, Glen received a distress call from the Polo over his forearm comm. It was Captain Rubel, who had barely escaped the bridge. He informed Glen that they too had been attacked as Glen surveyed the smothering shuttles before him. He watched as several of the Marines regained their wits and began firing pointlessly at the fleeing runabout with their pulse rifles. "Hold your fire," shouted Captain Mahan, realizing the craft was already far out of their range and they were wasting their rounds. "How bad are you hit?" Glen asked, holding his forearm comm up, seeing Rubel's image on the device. Rubel did not look hurt, but clearly scuffled and dirted from attack. "I don't have a full damage report yet. I just know the bridge is now depressurized, and I have 2 dead bridge officers and at least 4 seriously wounded. I will let you know the extent of the damage as soon as I know." Rubel signed off. "They hit the Polo too?" and asked as she used her hands to brush off the mud and dirt. "It seems so." Glen answered her. "Are you okay?" He was still concerned. "Yes, I am fine, thank you. I am just a mess." She answered him. Captain Mahan returned to Glen after making a quick examination of the damage to the shuttles. Both shuttles are heavily damaged. They tore holes into the cockpits, destroying at least half the controls. Neither shuttle will be able to lift off. "It seems Demi does not want us leaving." "Anyone hit?" he asked Captain Mahan. "No, Mr. Yeager." "At least he is not trying to kill us," and responded. "He has already killed at least 2 on the Polo." Glen answered. Rubel contacted Glen again on the 4-armcom, letting him know that they had also hit the hyper-engines, taking them out of commission. One shot did pass, though, into the actual hyper-engine room, where the second fusion reactor that powered the hyper-engines and the D-mass generator were housed. The single breach caused a depressurization of the engine room, but luckily everyone was able to evacuate with only a few injuries. The primary fusion reactor that powered the sublight engines was still up and running, so the rest of the ship still had power and, more importantly, life support. With the loss of the bridge and the hyper-engines down, they were dead in the water. Rubel informed him that they would need to reseal and repressurize the bridge before knowing the full extent of the damage. Until then, he would have no idea when they will be able to get control of the engines and weapon systems. Signing off with Rubel, Mahan rushed off to assist his men in putting out a fire that flared up in one of the shuttle's cockpits. Glen connected to Rebecca, stern, also through his 4-armcom. "Rebecca, are you okay?" "Am I okay? I was heading back to my cabin at the time we got hit. I was thrown against a bulk, head hitting my head again." She angrily responded, "Go to the medical bay to have it checked out." "Where do you think I am? But these idiots won't see me because they say they have more seriously wounded ahead of me. I have a large bump on my head, and who knows, perhaps another concussion." She screamed into her 4-armcom, "You're strong, Rebecca. I am confident you will be all right." Glen sincerely tried to assure her. "That is true. I am." She calmed down. "I need you to do something very important." He changed her focus. "What?" she asked in a much softer tone. "As soon as Rubel can get access to the bridge, I need you to send a message back to the EGG. That Demi and his men are alive and well and had not been taken by the Xingnis. I heard from one of the wounded from the bridge that she saw the spooky comm take a direct hit." She responded into her 4-armcom as she sat on the floor, leaning against one of the walls in the medical bay. The medic team and medic robots rushed about attending to the seriously wounded. "Rubel didn't tell me we can't contact Earth." Glen responded, "I am just telling you what I overheard." Rebecca felt her head throbbing as a medic robot finally approached her. "I need to go now. They are finally seeing me. Stay strong, Rebecca." "Thank you," she said before signing off. "Thank you," Glen repeated to himself as the link closed with Rebecca. For all the years Glen had known Rebecca, he realized it was the first time he ever heard her say those words. "What is it?" asked Anne. "As you heard, it looks as if we have no way to contact Earth now. I hope she is wrong, that the spooky comm was not it." Mahan returned from directing putting out the fire that had started on the Tartar II. Glen realized their situation was dire, especially if the runabout returned and made another pass at them, hitting more than just the shuttles. "Can you defend this position if they return?" Glen asked Mahan. "I would rather go into the tree line to the southwest of us. Those antimatter rifles will punch through any defensive works we could construct. Within the trees, it would be difficult for them to zero in on us, especially with our suits' cuttlefish camouflage. The armor elements of our suits are just extra weight against those weapons. We might as well be stark naked. If we leave for the trees, we will be leaving the shuttles behind. The shuttles are our only means of returning to the Polo." Glen replied and took his arm in both of hers. Their predicament was sinking into her. Fear began to overwhelm her. Holding on to Glen's arm magically helped relieve her swelling anxiety. "Mr. Yeager, I am not even sure if the shuttles can be repaired in the state they are in now." Mahan answered, "At least camouflaged in the trees, we can spot the runabout before it spots us. Our pulse rifles could take it down. The runabouts are much like our shuttles without military-grade defensive armor. Only their bellies and noses have ceramic heat shielding that could withstand our plasma rifle fire. The rest of their armor is basic anti-space dust grade. With a couple of good hits in those areas, we can take them out of the sky." Glen turned to, "We need to know if we can repair the shuttles with what we have here. Can you speak to the science team inside?" "Yes, I can do that." And responded a bit comforted that he was giving her something positive to do to help their circumstances. Glen turned back to Captain Mahan. "Place your men in 2-man teams around the farmhouse, and the shuttles at least 200 yards out on each point of the compass. Have them dig in and activate their cuttlefish camouflage. They are to open fire if the runabout returns. If you want all 8 points, I don't have enough men for 2-man teams. I only have 12, not counting myself, the 2 language specialists, and Sergeant Major Bryce. That is if you want us to also man the perimeter. We can do all 6 points with 2-man teams. Mahan replied, No, I want you and the specialists here. Place 2-man teams on the north, south, east, and west compass points at 200 yards out. The other 4 Marines set out at only 100 yards at the northeast, southeast, southwest, and northeast points. They should be in tight enough that 2 points and the outer points can cover them, yes. Glen asked. Our pulse rifles have an effective accuracy range of 2,000 yards. We should be able to defend against another attack by the runabout, especially since it takes time for them to open those doors to lean out and fire from. I am assuming they will think we will be fortifying the farmhouse. They also came in extremely close to fire upon us. So, I am assuming their weapons do not have that far a range. Mahan inquired. They don't. They are actually only using compressed air to fire the magnetic microspheres. My understanding is that the Xingnis had attempted using a chemical explosive to fire the projectiles, but the spheres were too fragile. Using a chemical explosive to fire them resulted in them breaking open within the weapons, prematurely releasing the antimatter and causing a reaction with the normal matter of the weapon, destroying the rifle completely and killing the user. They tried a stronger pellet that could withstand a chemical burst of energy, but then the pellets would not break open when they did hit their targets, not causing the reaction of antimatter with matter they wanted. So they settled on the gentler use of air compression to fire the weapons. As I stated before, it is still under development. The weapon is enhanced air rifle. I think they have an effective range of only 200 feet, in space, though it is infinite. Glen explained. So, then we should have range over them by quite a bit. I think your idea should work, Mr. Yeager. You sure you never served in the military? Mahan asked. Never did. Glen answered, Actually, when I had just graduated from high school, I did receive a call from an Army recruiter to serve in the Army. I told them I would be happy to if they made me a general and gave me the command of a division. They said they couldn't do that. So, I replied, they didn't really want me then. When they did really want me, they could call me back. The next day, a Navy recruiter called me and asked me to join the Navy. I said I would be honored to if they made me an admiral and gave me the command of a fusion carrier task force. They replied they could assign me to a fusion carrier, but only as a crewman. I told them if that was the case, they too didn't really want me. I again replied, when they really need my services and are willing to make me an admiral, contact me again. The Air Force and Marines never called me. Mahan laughed at Glen's story. Is that true? You really said that to them? True story. Glen placed his hand over his heart. I guess they told the Air Force and Marine recruiters about me, so they never bothered to call. Perhaps they should have taken your offer, Mr. Yeager. I think you would have been a very good commander. Thank you for thinking so, Captain. For now, I need you to get them out there and dug in. Camouflage their positions as best they can. If a runabout does try to make a second run on us, I want us to have the element of surprise. Aye, Mr. Yeager. Captain Mahan turned around and started barking out orders to his Marines, who gathered their gear and deployed to the 6 points of a compass.